Hey everyone! Welcome to today's episode of Storage Wars. On the auctioning block today lies the fate of 900 lots of silk suits and fur coats, many of them encrusted with diamonds and other precious gems. But that's not all. Alongside a mountain of clothes, we've got 200 bejeweled walking sticks, an unusually large collection of ping pong balls, 200 solid gold brooches. Also on offer, a car specifically modified to shoot perfume from its tailpipe. And let's not forget about the animals. Not only do we have horses, we've got an army of dogs, including poodles inexplicably dyed pink. This auction will run for 40 days straight, and everything must go because the original owner was born one of the richest men in Britain and ended up the poorest. No commercials. Just a month-long episode of Storage War. Okay, wait, no. This isn't an episode of Storage Wars in 2010. This is an episode of Eccentric Aristocrats from 1905. And this actually isn't reality TV. This is reality. All these items were actually auctioned off in the same estate sale. And that auction did last a full 40 days because everything not nailed down had to be sold to cover the debt of Britain's craziest noblemen. By the time the auction started, he had already died tragically at the age of 29. It had taken him just 5 years to blow through his enormous family fortune. He was considered a disgrace and a narcissist, the most shocking man in Britain. He's been described as the Freddie Mercury of the late Victorian era. Other nobles hated him. The lower classes were fascinated by him. His name was Henry Paget, the 5th Marquis of Anglesey. Stick around to the end of the video to find out how much money he actually spent. It's higher than you think. Henry Paget was no ordinary man. No ordinary man could ever acquire enough money to dress like this. He was the oldest son of the 4th Marquis of Anglesey, also named Henry Paget. His predecessors had much to brag about. The first Marquis lost his leg fighting against Napoleon in the Battle of Waterloo. The second Marquis was war hero Field Marshal Henry William Paget. His lineage, as well as his name, set expectations for him. But from the day of his birth in 1875, he was followed by scandal. His mother, Blanche Mary Boyd, was rumored to have had an affair with a French actor, Benoit Constant Coquelin, and Henry was believed by many to be their illegitimate son. Henry's father remarried to an American heiress named Mary Livingston King, who no doubt brought even more outrageous wealth into the family. Henry lived with them at the family estate of Plasnwyd in Anglesey, North Wales. His only friends there were his nanny and his dogs. That's probably why he spent so much on dogs later on, but we'll talk more about his poodles later. What young Henry lacked in social skills, he made up for in artistry and education. His status as the son of a marquis gained him entry to the prestigious Eton College. Later on, he was commissioned as a lieutenant of the Royal Welsh Fusiliers. He was an intelligent, respected young man, but that would soon be lost under a pile of scandals. Henry married his first cousin, Lillian Florence Maud Chetwynd, in January 1898. They honeymooned in Paris, and that was where Henry's impulsiveness first began to show. He bought his new wife an entire window display of jewels after they happened to walk by it. He then insisted his wife wear all these jewels in bed with no clothing on underneath. And despite how heavy they were, he insisted she sleep in them. He didn't touch her, only admired her body, her smooth skin, and beautiful complexion. Historians have theorized that this ritual reflected Henry's desire to be as beautiful as she was. His identity, motivations, and sex life were complicated, as we'll see. The marriage ended in disaster. Lillian unofficially left him 6 weeks after the wedding, and acquired an official annulment in 1901 due to the marriage apparently not being consummated. She never approved of his lavish lifestyle, especially the extensive partying and extravagant purchases. But this didn't bother Henry, because now he was free to really cut loose. He wanted to be a performer. He wanted to be an artist. He wanted to be beautiful. And he was finally in a position to fulfill his every desire when his father died in October 1898, leaving him the title of Marquis, the family estate, and an annual income of £110,000. That's about 23 million US dollars today, per year. Henry would go on to destroy all of this in 5 short years. His estate covered 30,000 acres and included his childhood home of Plas Newydd. He renamed it Anglesey Castle and proceeded to perform extreme renovations. For one, he turned the chapel into a 150-seat theater, shocking upper-class churchgoers. He gave it a grandiose design and christened it the Gaiety Theatre. Henry began showing acts there in 1899, starting out with simple pantomimes, songs and dances, then moving on to entire plays, starring himself. He invited locals to attend at no cost, and these weren't just nobles. His tenants, servants, neighbors, and guests of the property were also given free tickets. His shows included Shakespeare's Henry V and many of Oscar Wilde's plays. A controversial choice because Wilde had just been jailed for obscenity, and his plays were blacklisted for most theaters. But one performance he gave shocked society more than any other. His most infamous act was the butterfly dance, inspired by dancer Louis Fuller's movements. Henry would don a white silk gown and robes and wave them around like the wings of a butterfly. From this iconic performance and costume, he received the name the Dancing Marquis. Henry Paget's love of performance went on to exceed the boundaries of his own home. He poached a traveling theater troupe performing in a nearby village and paid them astronomically high salaries to tour with him around Europe for 3 years. At its peak, his new theater company had 50 members, and it took 5 trucks to carry all of their luggage. Henry himself traveled in a Pullman motorcar with a personal staff. When they performed at Anglesey Castle, he lodged all his members in a nearby village. The extravagant cost of his performances didn't stop there. The troupe traveled with painted sets and an in-house orchestra. Their props were copies of furniture from Anglesey Castle. Henry's personal costumes were made to order by couturiers and costumers from London. One of his costumes for an Aladdin performance cost £100,000, his entire annual income. Another, for a showing of Henry V, cost £40,000. He had numerous costume changes for each performance, so the cost of these outfits multiplied. He even insisted on using real jewelry instead of costume jewelry. This would have devastating personal consequences. When you spend so much money and do it publicly, you're bound to get robbed. And Henry was no stranger to losing his expensive goods regularly. Often his expensive costumes would be left in the dressing room, so anyone could easily steal them. And when they were taken, Henry would just order another one made at the same price. In 1901, Paget attended the London premiere of Arthur Conan Doyle's stage adaptation of Sherlock Holmes. Henry's valet, Julian Gault, took the opportunity to steal £50,000 of his employer's jewels, the equivalent of more than 10 million US dollars today. Paget, always loving a good drama, hired Arthur Conan Doyle himself to help him find the stolen jewels. I guess if Sherlock Holmes isn't real, you might as well hire the guy who invented him. After Gault was caught, he testified in court that a French woman named Mathilde had planned the theft. This mysterious Mathilde then disappeared to France with the diamonds and was never apprehended. Gault, on the other hand, ended up pleading guilty and was in prison for 5 years. So high risk, but no reward. Or maybe he just made Mathilde up, buried the jewels, did his time, and then recovered them. Who knows? Certainly not Henry. He was too distracted to be much bothered about losing a mere $10 million. Henry's true obsession seems to have been a love affair, but not the kind you might be expecting. A lot of observers both during Henry's lifetime and after have assumed that he was gay, or maybe transgender. The question of his identity is still debated today, but the truth may be simpler than we assume. The likeliest explanation is that Henry's only great love was himself. So much so that there are no records of him dating anyone or having sexual relationships. Henry took countless photos of himself, either stills or action shots of his performances. He would don his costumes for these photos, including some instances of cross-dressing. He owned numerous cameras, including a Kenora mutoscope, which was an early film viewer. He would then gift postcards of these images to his audience members. As one historian put it, Henry was a classic narcissist. The only person he could love and make love to was himself, because for whatever reason, he was unlovable. You can probably guess what happened to Henry after all this extravagance. He routinely spent more than his $23 million annual income, racked up enormous debts, and finally went bankrupt in 1904. Going on to say, "In 6 years, I have run through that fortune. Just how? I could not tell you. Well, I can tell you. Let's start with his yearly budget of £3,000, £590,000 today, for underwear alone. He wanted the underwear to be woven with gold. Priorities, right? He spent countless millions on his productions without ever charging money for tickets. He bought furs, diamond-encrusted robes, jackets covered in emeralds, and Charvet dressing gowns and jewels. He even had his car exhaust altered so the fumes smelled like rose-scented perfume. How do you even do that? And of course, when he ran out of cash, he mortgaged his properties to get more. In 5 years, he accumulated a debt of £544,000. That's £70 million, or $89 million US today. It's hard to say exactly how much he spent overall. Well, we know he bought at least £43 million worth of clothes. After his bankruptcy, he was left with only one servant and an adopted child, whom he may or may not have taken from someone. Research isn't the most clear. They first fled to Brittany and France for settling in Monte Carlo. He had a meager allowance of £2,000 per year. This, by the way, is equal to about £210,000 or $260,000 today, so don't go feeling bad for him. He attempted to create a gambling system at the Monte Carlo casinos to make himself rich again, but he wasn't very successful there. Henry Paget died in 1901 at only 29 years old in Monte Carlo's Hotel Royal from tuberculosis-induced pneumonia. His ex-wife Lillian and great-aunt stayed by his side during his death. His body would be sent back to Anglesey Estate, but no one wanted to accept the coffin back at home. You see, he was loved by the locals, his inclusivity and unique personality was admired, but the upper class, especially his family, found his actions and spending to be an embarrassment. He overstepped the boundaries of acceptable noble etiquette, which was subdued and reverent. Henry destroyed not just the fortune of his family, but also the reputation of the 4 Henry Pagets before him. These were war heroes and dignified members of society. He was neither. Obituaries mocked him, as his body was sent to Llandudno for burial, away from his beloved home. The title and estates passed on to his first cousin, Charles Henry Alexander Paget, who took the job much more seriously and worked to return the family inheritance to its former reputation. He removed Henry's beloved theatre, turning it back into a chapel. He also called himself the 5th Marquess of Anglesey, as if Henry had never existed. A 40-day auction named the Great Anglesey Sale took place to get rid of all of Henry's treasures. There were 17,000 lots to be sold. Rumor has it, an entire day was needed just to sell all of Henry's dogs. He had a particular fondness for poodles, sometimes being spotted carrying one with a bow under his arm in London, and he reportedly liked to dye them pink. A majority of Henry's photographs, documents, letters, and diaries were burned, an attempt to erase Henry's decadent life from history. And yet his legacy remains. Several untouched documents, including numerous photographs, were found in archival storage. When their ancestral estate was donated to the National Trust by the Paget family in 1976, it was turned into a public museum honoring Henry's brief, extravagant life. The house and gardens were open to visitors, and an art collection was created from his self-portrait photos. In March 2020, one of Henry's diamond performance tiaras went up for auction. It was worn by the wife of the 6th Marquess at King George VI's coronation in 1937. There are photos of Henry wearing this tiara, displaying it proudly on his head. His legacy lingered even after his cousin's attempts to wipe it from people's memories. You see, when you try to erase something from history, there's usually a reason why, and this often intrigues people further. Henry's ancestry may have been men of great honor and etiquette, but what's exciting about that? There have been films and musicals made about Henry, including How to Win Against History, created and performed by Cyril Davies in 2017. In 2020, famous designer Harris Reed created a collection based on Henry and his famous white silk butterfly dance robes. The collection was named Thriving in Our Outrage. From an outsider looking in, what Henry did does spark a bit of outrage. How could one person so thoughtlessly spend so much money? If we had infinite money, or at least £70 million, we'd be practical with it. We'd put it into investments or donate to charity, not buy ourselves a yacht the size of a cruise ship. But sometimes, do you ever just think, wouldn't it be nice to spend all the money in the world with no worry or care at all? All to do what you really love the most? If you enjoyed this video, please throw us a like and comment down below. And if you want to learn more about history facts, subscribe to the History Snob channel. See you next time.